This is my fifth time trying to film this video and bring out quotes from these various perspectives to try and answer the question of are you being patient or are you being avoidant, and the honest reality is I'm really struggling to make this video because it's such a uniquely intimate question. My personal bias while working with clients in intense, focused 4-month mentorships is that I'm there to accelerate and structure. They're already going through their healing process, and I provide dozens of books and dozens of hours of conversation and practices and exercises and very intense, challenging, introspective questions to try and accelerate their path. My aim is to try and do as much in 4 months as most people do in a year, if not more, but that isn't the best approach for most people if you're patiently working on your own healing in your own time. I got this question today about when's the right way of knowing if you're tired or just avoiding the work. You can see it there on the screen. And the honest reality is that I do believe most people are going a bit too slow and they're a bit too highly distracted. Doesn't mean that you are a failure, and doesn't mean that you're wasting your time and I'm trying to be hard on you. But what I am trying to say is that there's a better way to go about the healing process than the cliches and the lazy language that we're throwing around on the internet. I often hear these comments, or read these comments more accurately, which say you should take a break from the healing process and don't read books like Internal Family Systems Therapy or go too deep into somatics all the time because you can just live your normal life and enjoy the simple pleasures. But that doesn't work. If you're suffering from flashbacks or flooding, or you're actively in addiction, or you've got unresolved grief and pain and agony because of a breakup or a career loss or losing a loved one, you can't go back to normal life. You can't enjoy the simple pleasures because the wound is bleeding. And if your arm were literally bleeding, you would be a moron to try and go about your daily work routine. And rather than seeking the advice of a doctor, or if a doctor isn't around or you couldn't afford a doctor, finding a bandage or at least some way to cover up that immediate issue and try and get more advanced support further down the line. There's containment of the wound and then a deep healing of the wound. So where does this leave us in terms of you deciding if you're being slow and you should speed up, or actually you're experiencing a bit of burnout from reading too many therapeutic books or doing too many therapeutic introspection exercises and you should actually slow it right down? Got a few more metaphors to share with you, perhaps the most important one being my transparent bias towards speeding the process up, but I'm also going to bring out some quotes from these books and give a variety of perspectives and ultimately encourage you to probably go a little bit faster, but not in a way which is manic, but rather in a way which is more intentional and more rational and more focused. I'm going to give you another metaphor to capture my entire approach towards self-healing. Let's imagine that you're somebody who's got grief, somebody who's got some struggles with addiction, somebody who's got a damaged family relationship or two, and somebody that's looking towards, let's say, an authentic career path, which is most people. It's a cold read of you as an individual in my audience, let's call it, but most of us have some kind of strained family relationship, some kind of issue around grief, have struggled with addiction in one form or another, and usually have a variety of very simple human needs and desires and wounds. Consider your psyche and your body as a home, a physical building that you live in. If you wake up one morning and realize that you're missing the roof and there's wind and rain coming in and the windows are broken and you're stepping on the shattered glass, and when you try to fall asleep in the evening you have vermin and cockroaches crawling over your body, you would be insane to not prioritize repair. You would be truly mad to try and go about your day-to-day life and go out into the world and then come back and think that you're going to be safe and restored in a damaged home. So what I suggest that you do is you take as much energy and as much financial resources as possible and conduct that repair work as quickly and effectively as possible so that you can enjoy living in that home for decades. To give you a bit more of an extended construction metaphor, if your home's falling apart, don't spend 7 years finding the scaffolding and another 7 years going about the work only when you feel like it. Make the scaffolding as quick as you can and put it around the home, or prioritize the main issues. If you've got a wall that's falling over, fix that first and then repair the broken windows, and then maybe call in the exterminator to get rid of the vermin. There's a process that you can go through, and although it might be overwhelming to look at things like trauma or PTSD or failed relationships or addiction issues, there are resources that you can access, which I have given on this channel, over 200 books at this stage, maybe even close to 300 books shared across the channel, which form the psychological scaffolding that prepares you for the deep inner transformation, which is self-healing. And if you're fatigued or tired about the process, I understand it's difficult to do that repair work. No one literally wants to be spending long hours repairing a home. And yet, it's your psychological home that we're talking about. If you've got flashbacks, or flooding, or day-to-day anxieties and depressive swings, you should really prioritize healing this as quickly as possible. I try and give as many resources as I can on this channel so that you can do this freely, or at least very accessibly. A book is £10 to £15 if you buy it secondhand. Just take the resources that are given, build the scaffolding in 3 months and start the repair work over 3 years rather than needing 7 years to the scaffolding, and double that time to do the repair, because that difference is a decade of well-being. If you repair your home quickly, you get to enjoy living in a safe and warm environment for more years in a row. If you start this healing work when you're 30 and you get it done, more or less done, maybe you've got a few problems with a few windows, they're not cracked, but they don't quite shut properly, it's still a bit breezy, maybe every now and again a mouse runs across your kitchen floor. It's not perfect, but it's much better than it was before, and that's more or less healed. That's 80% healed, and it's where I want most people to be. Imagine a world where most people are 80% healed. They haven't got major conflicts with their mother, their father. They haven't got major anxieties about their career direction. They've got a good enough relationship with God as they understand God, and they're free of major addictions, even if they do slip up from time to time with spending too much time on a screen or overeating upon occasion. That's the good enough state. And the good enough state is what we should aim towards. And also, if we go into IFS, we've got this idea of patient persistence. So I'm going to go into that quote right now. Internal Family Systems, if you haven't seen it before, this is an essay collection, not the original work by Richard Schwartz, but it's talking about some of the qualities of the internal family systems therapist who works with trauma from a parts work-based perspective. And this is a quote from the book, talking about IFS therapists and how you would work with clients. This is a bit of an insight into the mind of a therapist. In our trainings, IFS therapists learn to be patiently persistent. Until there is a clear message from the client's protectors to stop, they learn to consistently offer the opportunity to keep going, knowing that in many cases the client is being invited to do the most difficult thing that she has ever done. When a therapist leads from the self, she can be doggedly persistent without coming across as pushy or insistent because she is not emotionally attached to achieving the goal. And then further down, it's talking about respect and talking about intensity, but also being calibrated to know when to slow down the pace. And this is something that I really try and bring into my coaching work when, although in my 4-month mentorships, I'm primarily interested in accelerating the path, do at least a year's worth of work in a 4-month time period across the major lanes of development. Usually 4 or 5 major themes can be covered in that kind of time frame. But it does require my clients to be reading at least a book a week. Some clients read 2 books a week. Clients need to then be journaling and exercising, and they need to be sober, and they need to be very intentional and very structured. I place a clear scaffolding around the process, but it's up to them to show up early on the Saturday morning and go up the ladder and start patching over on the cracks, or better yet, strip it all out and put a whole new structure in the first place. That takes time, but it can be much quicker than we expect. And again, compassion, respect, and patience when appropriate, but the persistence is key. I've actually got another quote from Alice Bailey, the theosophical thinker, great esoteric writing. If you haven't picked up A Treatise on White Magic, I highly recommend that you get a copy. It's very spiritually intense. It's old school spirituality from a esoteric theosophical perspective, but this is more of an intense angle, which I also agree with from my personal bias. And this is about the aspirational process of self-actualizing. Quote from the book about where people fail and where people trip up because they're not putting in the effort. Quoting, "It is here that so many aspirants fail. They do not do the very best they know. They fail to act in detail as their inner voice tells them. They leave undone certain things which they are prompted to do in their moments of meditation, and they fail to speak the word which their spiritual mentor, the self, urges them to speak. Final sentence, it is in the aggregate of these unaccomplished details that the big failures are seen. And this book is absolutely littered with highlights. It's at least 45 pages of notes in my second read. That's just a small sample of that spiritual fire, that righteous healing energy which encourages you to wake up and get to work. And yet also know when to take a break. I've got a final quote to bring out from Alexander Lowen: enjoy a bioenergetic approach towards somatic therapy and healing various physical and psychological challenges from a body-up perspective, and talking about a completely different idea, which is sometimes tiredness and fatigue can be a sign of healing in itself. Quoting from Alexander Lowen, highly recommend you read Lowen if you haven't already. Struggle is tiring, and the struggle for survival is very tiring. Since most people in our culture are survivors, fatigue is the most common symptom in the population. It is the physical side of feeling depressed, but survivors cannot afford to feel tired or depressed because they would be tempted to give up the struggle and die. And listen to this part in particular. Their defense is to deny the fatigue and carry on because they sense that their survival needs depend on it. As one woman said, quote, "If I lay down, I feel I'll never get up." But until one is ready to lay down, one denies the feeling of tiredness. A traveler carrying a heavy suitcase and running for a train will not feel how tired his arm is until after he lays down the suitcase. In therapy, to feel tired is a mark of progress if one can associate it to giving up the struggle. I'll read that final sentence again. It's a completely different idea in this video, giving you something to really simmer and really sit with. In therapy, to feel tired is a mark of progress if one can associate it to giving up the struggle. To finally feel tired, to finally let down the defenses of rigid perfectionism, or putting on the stone cold mask and pretending everything's okay, or reaching for the drink, reaching for something like this, that's where healing is starting to take place. And then it's a bit of a strange situation for me to place you in this video, because what if your current self-healing fatigue is actually a sign that you're healing in a way which is a genuine step forwards? What if you're finally feeling the fatigue, and you're feeling the fatigue because you're in contact with something which is painful, and you're actually in the best moment possible to sit down in a meditative moment, half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the evening, go for a walk in the middle of the day, and really listen to the depression, listen to the anxiety, listen to the grief, and seek counsel with the agony. It's possible. It's possible that the fatigue is the invitational point to the next step. It's that difficult process for a few days, a few weeks, or maybe a few months. As hard as that is, it could be your sign to just go a little bit further. And in the very least of cases, if you are watching videos like this and you're spending too many hours on YouTube and you're not reading the books that you've ordered and they're still on your bookshelf because you just haven't found the time to read them, and you're going through your social interactions feeling high anxiety or depressive and dissociated, just pay attention to the fact that you haven't set up the scaffolding and you're not doing the repair work in a way that would allow you to enjoy the process of being you for multiple years and decades at the level of love and intensity and joyful connection with others that you deserve and I want you to experience. You can condense the healing process, and you can likewise take breaks when you need to. But consider all these ideas together. How do you know if you're being lazy or if you're actually taking a wise break? I'd just go with the bias that I've carried for myself, which is I'd know that when I have the opportunity, I will be lazy, I'll be apathetic, and it's always easier to go on social media than sit down for an hour with my phone locked away in a drawer and read a book on trauma therapy. It's not fun, it's not enjoyable, it doesn't feel good, but it is the hard work of repairing a deep wound. If you don't want to do it on your own, the cost is more of a financial cost, and you go to a therapist, a counselor, or a coach. Usually if you work with a therapist or a counselor in a licensed sense, they'll do a bit more of the work on your behalf in the sessions. You'll pay more and it'll take a longer time period. If you work with someone who's a coach and more action-oriented, the responsibility will be placed on you, but still, there are many different ways to work with different types of wounds and ambitions. Just make the time, invest the money, cut away the distractions, and lean towards action where possible, because if there's one metaphor that I really want to re-emphasize, and you've seen me re-emphasize, it's not being lazy on setting up the scaffolding, being willing to go up the ladder, being willing to do the repair work, and accepting that yes, it does feel crappy to do the repair work, But guess what? You're going to feel crappy if you haven't healed your trauma regardless. And I know this from deep experience because I had a very depressive, very dark energy between the ages of 10 and 22. And it's only when I really started to fully immerse myself in trauma therapy that I then became the kind of man who can teach and take on responsibility for others. And guess what? If you're trying to do anything that's helping other people or any kind of entrepreneurial effort which has more of a soulful energy behind it, you're not going to be very effective until you've done this healing work in the first instance. So just take all these ideas together, and once again, if you really want a re-emphasizing, validating way to wrap up this video, remember what they say in internal family systems therapy, that patient persistence is key. You can wish the best for yourself, and you can intend a strong and consistent effort on your healing journey, but likewise be gentle when gentleness is appropriate. That's all I can say in a single video. If you enjoyed this video, leave me a comment in the comment section about a particular area that you want me to make more videos on, and I will try to oblige if possible. Be well, carve out the time, and read the books that you know you should read. Doesn't need to take decades. You can do this in just a few years, at least to 80%, maybe even 90%, and the world will be gifted by your healed presence.